Leigh Bortins. I'm here with my friend Lisa Bailey, and we're going to be talking today about math. As usual, another classical conversation. Welcome. Thanks for being here with me.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and talk to you about math.
Yeah. So when you hear that word math, we're going to talk a little later about all the ideas that jump into your head. But how do you know what you love to study and what you want to study and what you don't want to study? Just basics. Why do people like some things and not others?
I think that lots of times we have a natural affinity for a subject. Maybe it's something that our parents led us to love when we were little. Maybe it's just something that for some reason fuels our imagination. I have always loved literature. I think my parents read to me a lot when I was little, and so it was something that I was used to doing, and it fed my imagination, which was something I valued a whole lot as I was growing up. And so I have learned to love studying other things because I've come to appreciate them, though not necessarily because I had a natural affinity for it.
So people can learn to love things that they don't naturally love.
I think so.
I think so too, because we could all probably have a conversation on something that either we met someone or an idea and we just ran with it and we couldn't believe how exciting it was.
Yes.
We never thought we'd
yeah,
enjoy that.
something that I never found interesting previously that I now find absorbing because of something that someone told me about it.
So when it comes to just having an interest in a subject, whether it's math, which is what we'll talk a lot more about in a few minutes, or literature, Latin, whatever it is, sometimes our imagination, I love that word that you brought that up. So we've got to fire the imagination. But I always like bringing everything back to scriptures, and God was so clear in telling us that Adam knew Eve, and in that knowing of her, it was it was how did he know her? He'd gone through all these animals and knew they didn't meet this hunger, this imagination that he had inside of him for what he needed. And so then he meets Eve. Well, of course, there's a lot of discord and disharmony when you work with the person, and there's difficulties and struggles, and so we have that part of the study too, of the in scriptures. But that we love what we know. And so you start off saying that you love literature because you knew literature and you knew people who loved literature.
Yes.
And so there's like this culture of literature loving. And that's what we're trying to create, or we're trying to recreate, I think, in our math seminars with classical conversations, is an opportunity for the students to learn to love math. And they're not going to learn to love it if they don't know it.
Yes.
So you going from a literature person, describing yourself liking literature, to someone that can now appreciate math, what took you from one spot to the other? What is it you did?
I think it was spending time with math. It was also trying to understand how math fit together. How the concepts that I was learning fit together with things that I already knew. And until some of those connections were made for me, there was very little appreciation for math.
You made the analogy to Lego blocks before we started filming, so maybe share that one.
For me, and I was a good math student outwardly. I was telling Leigh, I went all the way through high school, never made less than an A in a math class, but I stayed a grammar student the whole time. Now I know enough to peg myself as a grammar student. I was like, it was like building with Legos that had the little connectors shaved off for me. I could build the same structure that the teacher built in class. I could make my structure look just like hers, but it was very easy to knock over because they weren't connected. Those ideas had been built, but not connected. And that made me a grammar student. I could follow any example that had been set for me, but I had no understanding of what it took to connect the concepts together.
So, and we'll talk a little bit more about how, the whole understanding part of it later, but what I hear you saying is you could follow the rote patterns.
Yes.
So people will say, well, we have to teach more than that. But what if we don't teach that? What would have happened to you? What do you think?
If we didn't teach more than just following a pattern?
Yeah, in other words,
exactly
if we ignored the grammar and
happened.
went right to the understanding, what would you understand?
Nothing.
Yeah, so
I would have nothing to understand. Now, I did have amazing teachers in early elementary who made us memorize multiplication tables, for instance. And I was really good at that. Memorization has always been a great forte for me. And so I was great at arithmetic. And when I went back to teaching algebra and I learned to love math because I was gaining the understanding, I was very glad that I had all those grammar skills because I could factor like the wind because I knew my multiplication tables. So the understanding would have been exciting, but I wouldn't have had anything to build on.
Right. So I know yesterday, or this last week, I had a student in Challenge 1, so that'd be Algebra 1, ask, is there some sort of procedure to solve the fourth root of 81? And I looked at him and said, yeah, know your math facts.
Yep.
Right? And so there's a hindrance to the algebra level if they don't know, have some of the memorization there. Something that also I wanted to bring out in this discussion about just beginning, why people like math, why they don't like math. This whole war, I even just called you a literature person a second ago and realized, that shouldn't come out of my mouth. We're human beings. We should be able to love everything. Right. We shouldn't be excluded from any realm of knowledge, right? So I just wanted to talk about, from my perspective, how I got to be the place where I just love math so much. One, I know I probably have some sort of innate desire to do well in math. I did have an engineering degree. People don't seem to realize, though, that when you say that, it doesn't mean you didn't work really hard at it. It didn't mean it was easy for me.
Right.
And, it's been interesting because you can see my boys, who I've worked with for 28 years now, when I teach them math problems, they see all the mistakes and the errors I make. I am good at math for one reason only. I practice it a lot. Just like a musician, right, who does the scales over and over again. But what's happened is by practicing it a lot, I've gotten to know numbers the way I think Adam knew Eve. And whoever makes that kind of connection, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm trying to pass on to my challenge students now is this idea of number sense. And, mathematicians talk about number sense in teaching children all the time. That's a common idea. Usually they mean, though, can you come to approximate answers without doing a lot of hard work? I'm saying something deeper than that. Do you actually know a number so well that you see it in unusual situations? For example, I'd like to pick on the number 3. 3 is so common to the Christian context because of the Trinity. So let me just ask you, when I think of 3, or say the number 3, what do you think of?
Well, I do think of the Trinity because of my faith background. I think of stability. I think of when my husband and I, when David and I first got married, his parents, we took all cast-off furniture that anybody would give us because we had nothing. And so we had a set of nesting tables, 3-legged tables. Now, in my family, we had never had a 3-legged table, and so I thought that was a weird thing. But I discovered that it was very stable. It was very sturdy. It was the perfect number for holding up. And this was a round table with 3 legs. And that was a really interesting spiritual lesson that strength is in the Trinity, but I think illustrates what you're talking about too.
I think it's so interesting that you brought up 3 and stability. I mean, so that's what I'm talking about, this number sense. Even this tripod that the camera's on that's filming us, it's a heavyweight thing that is held up by 3. So let's kind of talk about some of the threeness as a Christian, besides the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. You got soul, spirit, and body.
Right.
I think of our relationships with one another. I'm a wife, a daughter, and a mother. So there's just lots of threeness in that idea. But I even think of other things about 3. When I see the number 3 now, because I know it so well, I don't just see a 3. I think of like a Roman numeral 3. 3 eyes in a way. What are other ways you represent it? What about like 3 over 1? Or 3 to the first power? Or 3.0 divided by 1 to the first power? Those are all names, or those are all representations of the number 3.
Right.
That there's this sense of threeness. When I see the number 117, my brain says, oh, that's divisible by 3. Why? Because 3 is a magic number. And we don't show our children the magic with each of them. 1 plus 1 plus 7 is 9, which is divisible by 3. So 117 must be divisible by 3. But I see 127 and go, oh, that adds up to 10. It's not divisible by 3 or 9. It's not going to work.
Right.
So I just see 3s where they are. are because I have this sense of the number 3. And I think it's because for 28 years I've been teaching arithmetic to students.
Well, and because you've been playing with numbers and not just working with numbers. And I think that makes a big difference for our children. If we played with numbers more, I think that they would embrace the fun of numbers. Yeah. So why do you think that Saxon math is a good way, or the best way even, for us to teach math to our students?
Yeah, I mean, I love Saxon math, and my first response to that is that it doesn't have to be Saxon math. If you love something, like my friend who loves Latin says, I could teach it using an English cookbook. The book doesn't matter if you really love something. You're going to find a way to teach it. The problem is we haven't been taught through our K-12 system how to love math.
Right.
So as somebody who's trying to help folks enjoy math and really dig into it, Saxon has one thing that I think a lot of curriculums don't have: a lot of problems. Lots and lots of problems. It allows you to be like a musician with your scales and over practice. So, and then the other thing is, if you look at their K-12 curriculum laid out, just look at the table of contents one day of, say, the 8th grade book, and then the Algebra 2 book, and then the Advanced Math book.
Right.
It's very thorough. It covers a lot of stuff. And so we'll talk maybe later about the repetition and the process in Saxon and some of our other tapes. But the thing about Saxon that I just appreciate is this idea of repetition over a period of time. That the brain works from not seeing 5 spelling words one week and another 5 the next week and never revisiting.
Right.
It's not what happens. You, as a child, you need to see something, and this whole idea of Sabbath is really important. You see something, you wrestle with it, you work, and then you rest, and then it comes back to you, and from the rest, the body clicks, and now you know what you didn't know a week ago. It just happens, and we see that light bulb turn on.
Sometimes a new concept has to marinate for a little while. That if it doesn't make sense to them right now, that's okay. That might even be expected, and we're going to revisit it in a week or so, and they are going to find that their brain has been working on it while they weren't even aware of it, and that some of that understanding has clicked in.
Yeah, because one of the ideas, with that whole thing of rest is that we all know our children's bodies grow the most when they're sleeping at night.
Right.
That it's rest that is the final step in growth. And so Saxon allows that to happen, where you see ideas and you still don't really know what you're doing, but you see them again, and then a few days later again, and it comes back. Right. And so that it's a natural process. So that's just one of the reasons that we like Saxon. We'll talk about more later. But you had said something to me before we started filming that I thought was really great, that there's going to be pain somewhere in learning something new, right? Most people think, it should be all fun and entertainment and we should love it. That's not real.
Right. That sets a lot of us up for disappointment, or it makes us think that we must be doing something wrong because our children are not loving this and we are not loving this, and so it either is not worth it or we're doing it wrong. But sometimes that's just the nature of the beast, and there's pain involved in memorizing the multiplication tables, but the blessing, the payoff will come later. Or you can defer the pain and just keep skip counting your way until you get to Algebra 1, and then the pain will click in again when you have to watch those students sit there and take 20 minutes to factor out an equation that should have taken them 2.
Right, be faster. And we were making the connection to our economy is going through that same thing right now, and the politicians, they're trying to continue to defer the pain. As classical educators, we know that if the forms, the grammar, the basics were just really sound and solid, the dialectic, the rhetoric, the growth, the outcome is enormous in comparison to the constant deferment. So all of our senators and congressmen should watch this video.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us in this conversation. Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks.